The darkness of space stretched endlessly beyond the viewing port of Sentinel-7. Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and stared at the monitor again. The signal was still there, pulsing with a rhythm that made no sense. He had been a communications officer for 8 years, and he had never seen anything like this. "Lisa, come look at this," he called across the small operations room. Lisa Grant rolled her chair over, her coffee mug balanced carefully in one hand. She was the best signal analyst on the station, and if anyone could make sense of this, it would be her. She set down her coffee and leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the pattern scrolling across the screen. "That's not natural," she said quietly. "That's definitely artificial." Jake nodded. He had known it from the moment the signal first appeared on their systems 3 hours ago. Sentinel-7 was the farthest human outpost from Earth, a lonely monitoring station that orbited Neptune and watched the depths of space beyond. Most days were boring. Most days nothing happened. Today was different. "Should we wake up Commander Blake?" Lisa asked. "Already awake," a gruff voice said from the doorway. Roger Blake walked into the room, still buttoning his uniform jacket. The commander was a veteran of the Mars colonies, a man who had seen enough strange things in space to stay calm when others panicked. But even he looked concerned as he approached the monitors. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Roger asked. 3 hours and 17 minutes, Jake replied. "It's coming from beyond the solar system. Way beyond. Maybe 40 or 50 light years out." Roger leaned closer to the screen. The signal was complex, layered with mathematical patterns that seemed to shift and change. It was beautiful in a way, like looking at a piece of art made entirely of numbers. "Can you decode it?" Roger asked. Lisa shook her head slowly. "I've been trying. Whatever this is, it's way more advanced than anything we've ever made. The compression alone is something we can barely understand. But I think I'm starting to see a pattern." She typed rapidly, pulling up a new window on her screen. Numbers and symbols filled the display, rearranging themselves as her program tried to make sense of the alien data. "It's mathematical," she continued. "Pure math. No language, no words, just equations and patterns. And I think it's repeating, like a broadcast on a loop." "A message," Jake said. "Maybe," Lisa agreed, "but not meant for us. Look at the frequency and the direction. This signal is being sent outward, away from Earth. Whoever made this wasn't trying to talk to us. We just happened to pick it up." Roger crossed his arms, his face thoughtful. This was the kind of decision that could end a career. Protocol was clear. When they detected something unusual, they were supposed to report it to Earth and wait for instructions. But Earth was 4 light hours away. By the time they got a response, it would be 8 hours. And something about this signal felt urgent. "Keep working on the translation," Roger said finally. "I want to know what this says." For the next 6 hours, Lisa worked without stopping. Jake brought her food and more coffee, watching over her shoulder as she slowly, piece by piece, began to understand the alien message. Roger stayed in the operations room, pacing like a caged animal. "I've got it," Lisa said suddenly. Her voice was shaking. "I've got part of it, at least." Roger and Jake crowded around her station. On the screen, Lisa had managed to translate a small portion of the signal into something humans could understand. It wasn't perfect. There were gaps and uncertainties. But the meaning was clear enough to make Jake's blood run cold. "It's a warning," Lisa whispered. "This whole signal is a warning. They're telling everyone to stay away from this region of space. There's something dangerous here, something that destroyed civilizations." "They?" Roger asked sharply. "Who are they?" "I don't know," Lisa admitted. "But whoever sent this has been broadcasting for a long time. Maybe decades, maybe longer. This is a quarantine beacon." The room fell silent. Jake felt his heart pounding in his chest. For his entire life, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. There was someone else out there, and they were afraid of something. "We need to report this to Earth immediately," Roger said, but his hand hesitated over the communication panel. Jake spoke up before he could stop himself. "We should answer them." Both Roger and Lisa turned to stare at him. "Are you crazy?" Lisa asked. "This signal wasn't meant for us. We don't know who sent it or why. We don't know what they're warning us about." "Exactly," Jake said, his mind racing. "We don't know anything. This is first contact. This is the biggest moment in human history. We can't just listen and report. We have to respond." Roger was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see the conflict in the commander's eyes. "Protocol said to report and wait. But protocol had been written by people who never thought this day would actually come. If we respond, Roger said slowly, we're telling whoever is out there that we exist. We're putting Earth's location on the map. We could be inviting danger. Or we could be joining a conversation that humanity deserves to be part of, Jake countered. Sir, someone out there is advanced enough to send this kind of signal across light years of space. If they wanted to find us, they probably already could. But this warning, this beacon, it means they care about other species. They're trying to protect people, or they're trying to protect themselves, Lisa said quietly. Maybe they don't want anyone stumbling into whatever is out here. Roger walked to the viewing port and stared out at the stars. The decision weighed heavily on him. Jake could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his hands clasped behind his back. If we do this, Roger said without turning around, we do it right. Lisa, can you construct a response using the same mathematical framework as the original signal? Lisa nodded slowly. I think so. It'll take a few hours, but yes. Do it, Roger ordered. Keep it simple. Let them know we received their warning. Let them know we're here. Jake felt a surge of excitement and fear. This was really happening. They were about to announce humanity's presence to the universe. It took Lisa 4 hours to construct the response. It was brief, just a simple mathematical acknowledgement that they had received and understood the warning. Jake helped her transmit it, using the same frequency and encoding as the original signal. Then they waited. 2 hours passed in tense silence. Jake was starting to think that maybe nothing would happen. Maybe the signal was old, automated, and no one was actually listening. Then the response came. It was short, just a burst of data that lasted less than 5 seconds. But when Lisa decoded it, the message was unmistakable. Coordinates in space, a timestamp, and something that could only be interpreted as surprise. Someone out there had heard them, and they wanted to meet. Roger Blake stared at the decoded message for a long time. Then he reached for the communication panel that would send a priority message to Earth. This is Commander Roger Blake of Sentinel-7, he said into the microphone. I am reporting first contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence. Request immediate instructions. Jake looked at Lisa. She looked back at him. Both of them were smiling despite their fear. Everything had just changed. Humanity had answered a signal that wasn't meant for them, and now there was no going back. 3 weeks of arguments finally ended with a decision. Earth's government authorized the mission, though many officials thought it was too dangerous. They selected the Pathfinder, an exploration vessel that had been designed for long journeys into deep space. Engineers worked around the clock to install experimental quantum drives that might make the ship fast enough to reach the meeting coordinates in time. Helen Pierce stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder and watched the work crews make their final checks. She had been chosen to command the mission because of her experience with first contact protocols, even though those protocols had been written for scenarios no one truly believed would happen. Now she was about to lead 12 people on a journey into the unknown. All systems are showing green, Commander, Danny Cruz said from the pilot station. He was young for such an important position, only 32, but he was the best navigator in the fleet. If anyone could guide them to the coordinates that the alien signal had provided, it was Danny. How long until we can depart? Helen asked. 2 hours, Danny replied. The quantum drives need to finish their calibration sequence. Helen nodded and walked through the ship, checking on each member of her crew. In the science bay, Dr. Karen Wells was organizing her equipment. Karen was a xenobiologist, one of the few humans who had spent her career preparing for the possibility of alien life. She looked excited and terrified in equal measure. Are you ready for this? Helen asked her. Karen laughed nervously. I've spent 15 years studying life on other worlds. But every world we've found has been empty. Just bacteria and simple organisms. Now we're about to meet something that builds technology more advanced than ours. Am I ready? I have no idea. In the engineering section, Marcus Cole was running diagnostics on the quantum drives. He was a big man with careful hands, the kind of engineer who understood machines like they were living things. He had volunteered for the mission the moment it was announced. These drives are experimental, Marcus said when Helen checked on him. We've tested them in simulation, but never on a real journey this long. They should work. But should isn't the same as will. Can we make the rendezvous time? Helen asked. Marcus nodded slowly. If nothing breaks, yes. We'll get there with about 6 hours to spare. But Commander, if something does break, We'll be stranded so far from Earth that rescue would take years. I know, Helen said quietly. We all know the risks. In the security office, Lieutenant Paul Henderson was checking weapons and defensive systems. He was a cautious man, someone who planned for worst-case scenarios. Helen knew he had argued against the mission in the early meetings. I still think this is a mistake, Paul said bluntly. We're flying into a meeting with something we don't understand, in a region of space that they specifically warned everyone to avoid. This could be a trap. It could be, Helen agreed. But we're going anyway, Paul sighed. Then I'll make sure we're as ready as possible. But Commander, promise me something. If this goes wrong, if these aliens turn out to be hostile, you'll give the order to run. Don't try to be a hero. Helen met his eyes. If it comes to that, I promise we'll run. Jake Morrison from Sentinel-7 had been brought onto the mission as their communications specialist. He was in his quarters, reviewing everything they knew about the alien signal. Lisa Grant, who had first helped decode the message, was working with him. They had become the ship's experts on the mathematical language the aliens used. I keep thinking about what we're doing, Jake said as Helen entered. We responded to a warning beacon. What if they're angry that we ignored the warning? We didn't ignore it, Helen replied. We acknowledged it. There's a difference. I hope they see it that way, Jake said. The Pathfinder departed on schedule. The quantum drives engaged with a sound like reality tearing, and suddenly they were moving faster than anything humanity had ever built. The stars outside the viewing port stretched into long lines of light. The journey took 4 months. It was a strange time for the crew. They were moving through space at incredible speed, yet they still had to live day by day in the confined spaces of the ship. They ate meals together, ran drills, and tried to prepare for something no one could really prepare for. During the second month, they started receiving more transmissions. The signals came regularly every few days. Lisa and Jake worked to decode them, and what they found was troubling. These aren't greetings, Karen said during a briefing in the command center. She had been helping Lisa and Jake analyze the content of the messages. These are technical documents, warnings. They're telling us about something dangerous. Helen studied the translated data on the screen. The messages contained references to something called the Cascade, though that was just their best guess at translating the alien term. Whatever it was, it had apparently destroyed multiple civilizations. They're being very specific, Lisa added. They're describing containment procedures, quarantine protocols. This region of space isn't just dangerous, it's been deliberately isolated. Why would they ask us to meet them in a quarantine zone? Marcus asked. No one had a good answer for that. In the 4th month, they finally approached the coordinates. The quantum drives powered down, and the Pathfinder returned to normal space. What they saw made everyone on the bridge fall silent. There was a structure floating in the void. It was massive, easily the size of a small moon. The surface was covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift when you looked at them directly. Lights pulsed across its surface in sequences that reminded Helen of breathing. That's not natural, Danny whispered. No, Helen agreed. That's definitely not natural. They scanned the structure from a distance. It was old, incredibly old. The surface showed signs of damage and decay, but it was still active in some way. Power signatures flickered deep within its core. Commander, Paul said urgently, I'm detecting another ship. On the main screen, a vessel appeared from behind the massive structure. It was unlike anything in human experience. The design was organic, flowing, like something grown rather than built. It moved with grace, approaching the Pathfinder slowly. Battle stations, Helen ordered, though she kept her voice calm. Wait, Jake said suddenly. They're transmitting, using the same mathematical language as before. Lisa worked quickly to translate the message. Her hands were shaking. They're greeting us, she said. They're saying welcome. They want to talk. Helen took a deep breath. This was it. First contact. The moment that humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Open a channel, she ordered. All frequencies. Let them know we're ready to communicate. The alien ship moved closer. Helen could see details now. The surface seemed almost alive, with patterns of light flowing across it like veins carrying blood. It was beautiful and frightening. A response came through. Jake and Lisa worked together to translate it in real time. The message was being sent carefully, slowly, like someone speaking to a child. They want to send over a translator device, Lisa said. Some kind of technology that will help us understand each other better. Could be a weapon, Paul warned. Could be a gift, Karen countered. Helen made a decision. Tell them we accept. But we'll meet in neutral space between our ships. The alien vessel seemed to understand. A small pod detached from its surface and drifted toward a point between the two ships. Helen ordered a shuttle prepared. She would go herself along with Karen, Jake, and Paul. As Helen suited up for the transfer, Marcus appeared in the airlock bay. Be careful out there. Commander, he said. Always am, Helen replied, though her smile was tight. The shuttle ride took only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. When they reached the neutral point, the alien pod was already there, floating peacefully. It opened as they approached, revealing a device that looked like a crystal grown into an impossible shape. Jake carefully retrieved it using the shuttle's mechanical arm. The moment it was inside their shuttle, the device activated. Sound filled the cabin. It was not words exactly, but something that their brains interpreted as words. Greetings, the voice said. We are surprised you came. We are surprised you answered. We must talk about what you have done. Helen looked at her crew. They had come all this way. There was no turning back now. We're listening, she said, hoping the device would translate her words just as clearly. The translation device worked better than anyone expected. Within an hour, Helen and her team were back on the Pathfinder and the alien ship had moved closer. They were communicating in something that felt almost like real conversation, though there were still gaps and confusions. The alien called herself Singing Echo, or at least that was how the translator rendered the harmonics of her name. She explained that she represented the Valar Collective, a coalition of 7 different species that had worked together for thousands of years. Helen tried to imagine what that meant. Humanity had barely managed to unite their own planet. The idea of 7 different alien species cooperating seemed almost impossible. We have watched this region for 300 of your years. Singing Echo's voice came through the translator. The structure you see is dangerous. We call it the Cascade. It must never wake. Helen sat in her command chair, listening carefully. Around the bridge, her crew was silent and attentive. This was the conversation that would define humanity's future. Why did you tell us to come here if it's so dangerous? Helen asked. There was a pause. The translator made a sound like wind chimes. We did not tell you to come, Singing Echo replied. The warning signal was meant for species with advanced travel capability. Species that might stumble into this region by accident. Your response was unexpected. Your technology should not have been able to reach this far. Karen leaned forward. But we did reach this far. Does that matter? Yes, Singing Echo said simply. It matters very much. By answering our warning, you have announced yourselves. You have marked your world as technologically active. This is dangerous. Paul had been listening with growing concern. Dangerous how? He asked. The translation device was quiet for a moment, as if Singing Echo was choosing her words carefully. The Cascade was created long ago by a civilization that no longer exists. It was designed to learn, to grow, to absorb knowledge. But something went wrong. The Cascade became hungry. It consumed its creators. Then it spread to other worlds, other civilizations. It took their knowledge, their technology, their very patterns of thought. It grew stronger with each world it destroyed. Helen felt cold. How was it stopped? A coalition of species, the first Valar Collective, fought against it. They could not destroy it. The Cascade had become too vast, too complex. But they managed to trap it here in this structure. They put it to sleep. For 5,000 years it has dreamed. We watch to make sure it never wakes. Jake was studying his monitors. But it is waking, isn't it? I'm seeing increased power readings from the structure. Yes, Singing Echo said, and for the first time there was something like fear in the translated voice. When you responded to our warning, you used electromagnetic signals. The Cascade is designed to detect such signals. It interprets them as signs of developing technology, signs of new knowledge to consume. Your response signal may have triggered its awakening protocols. The bridge fell silent. Helen felt the weight of what they had done settling on her shoulders. They had meant well. They had wanted to join the galactic conversation. Instead, they might have awakened something that could destroy them all. Can we stop it? Helen asked quietly. We do not know, Singing Echo replied. The Cascade's internal systems are activating. If it fully wakes, if it breaks free of this structure, it will begin hunting again. And now it knows the direction of your signal. It knows where your Earth is located. Marcus spoke up from his engineering station. How long do we have? Hours, perhaps days. The cascade wakes slowly, testing its systems, but once it reaches full activation, nothing will stop it. Paul stood up. Then we need to leave. Now. We need to warn Earth, get them to prepare defenses. Defenses will not help, Singing Echo said. The cascade has defeated civilizations far more advanced than yours. If it reaches Earth, your world will fall. Helen closed her eyes. This was her fault. She had authorized the mission. She had agreed with Jake's argument that they should respond to the signal. And now Earth itself was at risk. There must be something we can do, Karen said desperately. You've been watching this thing for 300 years. You must have some kind of plan. We have containment protocols, Singing Echo replied. If the cascade begins to wake, we can attempt to overload its power systems. This would force it back into dormancy. But it is dangerous. The structure might explode. Anyone inside would be killed. Someone has to go inside? Jake asked. Yes. The overload must be triggered manually from the central core. Our people have prepared for this possibility, but we hoped it would never be necessary. Helen looked at her crew. She could see the fear on their faces, but she could also see determination. They understood what was at stake. We'll help, Helen said firmly. This is our fault. We should be part of fixing it. Your fault? The translator made that wind chime sound again. You did not know. You could not have known. The warning signal was not clear enough. We should have been more careful in how we broadcast it. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, Helen replied. What matters is stopping the cascade before it's too late. For a long moment there was silence. Then Singing Echo spoke again. You are very young as a species. Your technology is primitive, but you have courage. This is noted. If you truly wish to help, we will not refuse. Over the next several hours, the Valor sent over technical data about the cascade structure. Marcus and Karen studied it obsessively, trying to understand the alien technology. It was far beyond anything humanity had created, but some of the basic principles were similar enough that they could follow the logic. It's like a massive computer, Marcus explained during a briefing, but instead of silicon chips, it uses something we don't have a name for. Quantum processing on a scale we can barely imagine. The central core is where all the processing happens. That's where we would need to plant the overload device. How do we get to the core? Paul asked. There are access tunnels, Karen said, pointing to a schematic on the screen. But the cascade security systems will activate once we enter. We'll be detected immediately. Then we move fast, Helen said. We get in, plant the device, and get out before it can stop us. Jake was studying the power readings from the structure. Commander, the activation level is increasing. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it soon. Helen looked at her crew. I need volunteers. This mission is dangerous. Possibly suicide. I won't order anyone to go. Every hand went up. Every single person on the bridge volunteered without hesitation. Helen felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. These were good people. Brave people. She could not let them all die. I'll take a small team, she decided. Danny, you stay with the ship. If this goes wrong, you run. You get back to Earth and warn them. Marcus, you're coming with me. We need an engineer who understands this technology. Paul, I need security. Jake, your communication skills might help us interface with the cascade systems. I should go too, Karen said. I'm the xenobiologist. I might see something the rest of you miss. Helen shook her head. I need you here coordinating with the Valar. If we fail, you'll need to help them with the next attempt. Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but she nodded. Understood, Commander. Singing Echo's voice came through the translator. We will send 2 of our people with you. They know the structure better than we can explain. But Commander Helen, you must understand, if the cascade fully awakens while you are inside, we will have no choice. We will destroy the structure with you in it. We cannot let the cascade escape. I understand, Helen said. If it comes to that, you do what you have to do. The preparation took 2 hours. The Valar provided them with the overload device, a piece of technology that looked like a sphere of frozen light. They also provided suits that would protect them from the cascade's internal environment. The suits felt strange, like wearing liquid metal. As Helen was about to board the shuttle that would take them to the structure, Lisa pulled her aside. Commander, Lisa said quietly, I've been analyzing the cascade's activation patterns. It's not random. It's searching. It's trying to locate the source of the signal we sent. Can you stop it? Helen asked. No, Lisa said, but I can confuse it. I can send out false signals.
Make it think the source is somewhere else.
It might buy you time. Do it, Helen ordered. Helen joined her team in the shuttle. Marcus, Paul, Jake, and 2 Velar representatives whose names translated roughly as Bright Current and Stonesong. They were small compared to humans, with 4 arms each and skin that seemed to shift colors. Ready? Helen asked. Ready, they all replied. Danny piloted the shuttle toward the massive structure. As they approached, Helen could see the patterns on its surface moving faster now. The cascade was waking up. They were running out of time. The shuttle docked at one of the access ports. Helen took a deep breath and checked her equipment one last time. Let's go save the galaxy, she said, and led her team into the darkness. The inside of the cascade structure was like walking through a dream made of light and mathematics. The corridors were not built from metal or stone, but from something that looked like crystallized data. Patterns flowed through the walls, numbers and symbols that shifted and changed as they watched. Helen felt like she was inside a living computer, and in a way she was. Bright Current led the way with quick, precise movements. The Velar moved differently than humans, more fluid, as if they were swimming through the air. Stonesong stayed at the back of the group, watching for threats. Between them, Helen, Marcus, Paul, and Jake moved carefully, trying not to touch anything that might trigger an alarm. The core is 3 levels down, Bright Current said through the translator device. We must move quickly. The cascade is analyzing our presence. They found a pathway that spiraled downward into the structure's depths. The walls around them pulsed with increasing intensity. Helen could feel a presence pressing against her mind, like something vast trying to look at her. It was deeply unsettling. Is it watching us? Paul asked, his hand on his weapon. Yes, Stonesong replied. The cascade observes all things within itself. It is trying to understand what we are. Marcus was scanning the walls with his equipment. The technology here is incredible. These crystals aren't just storing data, they're processing it. Every wall, every surface is part of the computer. Don't get too fascinated, Helen warned. We're here to shut this thing down, not study it. They descended deeper. The air, if it could be called air, grew heavier. Helen felt pressure building in her ears. The patterns on the walls were moving faster now, swirling in complex dances that made her dizzy if she looked at them too long. Jake suddenly stopped. Wait, something's wrong. Before anyone could ask what he meant, a section of the wall rippled and something emerged. It was made of the same crystalline material as everything else, but it had a shape, a purpose. It looked vaguely like an insect, but the size of a large dog. Its surface reflected light in a way that hurt to look at. Security drone, Stonesong said urgently. Move, they ran. The creature or machine or whatever it was followed them. It was fast, faster than they were. Paul turned and fired his weapon. The energy blast hit the drone and scattered into prismatic fragments. The drone did not even slow down. Weapons don't work, Paul shouted. Bright Current made a decision. She stopped running and turned to face the drone. Her forearms moved in a pattern too quick to follow. She seemed to be gesturing at the walls themselves. The patterns around them flickered and changed. The drone stopped, frozen in place, its surface flickering with confusion. I have confused its recognition protocols, Bright Current said. But it will adapt quickly. We must keep moving. They ran again, and behind them Helen could hear the drone starting to move once more. The corridor opened into a larger chamber. The walls here were covered with what looked like screens, thousands of them, each showing different images, equations, star maps. Scenes of worlds Helen had never seen. Some screens showed civilizations in their glory. Others showed the same civilizations burning. The cascade's memory, Marcus breathed. These are all the species it consumed. Don't look, Helen ordered. Keep moving, but Jake had stopped. He was staring at one of the screens with a look of horror on his face. Helen followed his gaze and felt her stomach drop. The screen was showing Earth. Specifically, it was showing the exact location where Sentinel-7 had transmitted their response. The cascade had already found them. It knows where we are, Jake whispered. It knows exactly where Earth is. Then we stop it now, Helen said firmly. Bright Current, how much farther? 1 more level, the Velar replied. They found another passage leading down. As they descended, the pressure increased. Helen's suit began to make warning sounds. The environment here was not meant for organic life. The cascade's core operated at energy levels that should have been impossible. The passage opened into a vast spherical chamber. At the center, floating in empty space, was something that made Helen's mind hurt to perceive. It looked like a star made of pure thought, constantly collapsing and expanding, radiating patterns that carried more information than her brain could process. "The core," Marcus said with awe in his voice. "That's the Cascade's central processing unit." Bright Current held up the overload device. "We must attach this to the core's outer shell. Once activated, it will create a cascade failure in the processing systems. The cascade will shut down to prevent complete destruction." "How do we get to it?" Paul asked. "It's floating in the middle of the chamber." Stonesong was already moving. The Velar's body seemed to shift, becoming less solid, and then she was floating, drifting toward the core like a leaf on water. She reached the edge of the pulsing sphere and gestured for them to throw the device. Bright Current threw it with precision. Stonesong caught it and began attaching it to the core's surface. The moment she touched the sphere, everything changed. The entire structure screamed. It was not a sound, but Helen felt it in her bones and her thoughts. The cascade knew what they were doing. The walls of the chamber began to ripple. More security drones emerged, dozens of them, converging on Stonesong. She worked frantically to attach the device while the drones closed in. Paul and Jake opened fire with their weapons, even though they knew it would not help much. Marcus was working on his equipment, trying to do something, anything, to slow the drones down. Helen found herself speaking into her communicator, calling back to the ships. "Karen, we need help. The security systems are overwhelming us." Karen's voice came back immediately. "Lisa is already on it. She's flooding the structure with signal noise. It should confuse their targeting systems." It helped, but not enough. The drones were adapting too quickly. One of them reached Stonesong just as she finished attaching the device. The drone struck her and the Velar fell away from the core, tumbling through the empty space of the chamber. Bright Current cried out in a sound that the translator could not render into words. "Activate it," Helen shouted. "Stonesong, activate the device." But Stonesong was not moving. She hung in the air, her body flickering with the same crystalline light as the drones. The cascade was trying to absorb her, to take her patterns, her knowledge. Marcus made a sound of frustration and then did something reckless. He pulled out a data pad and began typing furiously. "Jake, I need you to transmit something for me." "Transmit what?" Jake asked, still firing at the drones. "Anything, everything, human data. Music, literature, mathematics, random noise. Just flood the system with as much human information as you can." "Why?" Helen demanded. "Because the cascade learns by pattern recognition," Marcus explained rapidly. "It absorbs technology, studies it, understands it. But human thinking is messy. Our math is inefficient. Our logic is full of creativity and chaos. If we flood it with our patterns, it might get confused. It might not be able to process us." It was insane. It was brilliant. Helen nodded to Jake. "Do it," she ordered. Jake connected his communication device to Marcus's data pad and began transmitting everything he could access. Human languages, music from Earth, mathematical proofs done the human way, with all their inefficient steps and creative leaps, poetry, art, the chaotic, wonderful mess of human thought poured into the cascade systems. The effect was immediate. The drones froze. The patterns on the walls began to stutter and glitch. The core itself flickered, its perfect pulses becoming irregular. The cascade was trying to understand what it was receiving, but human thought did not follow the logical patterns it was designed to process. "It's working," Bright Current said with amazement. "The cascade cannot analyze your data. It is too different from anything in its memory." Stonesong suddenly moved. The Velar reached out to the device she had attached to the core and activated it. Light exploded from the sphere. Not the clean light of the cascade's energy, but something wild and chaotic. The overload had begun. "Everyone out," Helen screamed. "Move now." They ran back the way they had come. Behind them, the core was tearing itself apart, creating a cascade failure just as planned. The structure shook. Pieces of crystallized data fell from the ceiling. The security drones stopped moving, frozen like statues. Bright Current was carrying Stonesong now, moving faster than Helen thought possible. They reached the spiral corridor and climbed upward while the structure collapsed around them. Marcus fell and Paul grabbed him, hauling him to his feet. Jake was transmitting the entire time, flooding the cascade with human chaos. They burst into the docking area where their shuttle waited. Danny had kept the engines running. The moment they were aboard, he pulled away from the structure. Through the shuttle windows, Helen watched the massive facility begin to implode. Sections were going dark, the lights dying one by one. Did we do it? Paul asked between gasping breaths. Unknown, Bright Current replied. She was tending to Stonesong, whose body was slowly returning to its normal appearance. The overload is triggered, but we do not know if it was in time. They made it back to the Pathfinder. The Valar ship was waiting alongside them. For a long minute, everyone watched the massive structure that was the Cascade. It was still collapsing inward, the lights continuing to die. Then it stopped. The structure went completely dark, silent, dead. The Pathfinder drifted in space while two different species tried to understand what had just happened. On the bridge, Helen watched the dark structure that had once been the Cascade. It was hard to believe that something so vast and terrible was now silent. But the question that occupied everyone's mind was simple. For how long? Marcus had not stopped working since they returned. His engineering station was covered with data from the Cascade, information they had gathered during their desperate mission inside. Now he was analyzing it all, trying to understand what they had actually accomplished. The virus we introduced, the human data patterns, they worked better than we could have hoped, Marcus explained during an emergency briefing. The Cascade tried to process our information using its standard protocols, but our math, our logic, our entire way of thinking was so different that it could not find patterns it recognized. It was like feeding a computer program written in English to a machine that only understands pure binary. The system crashed. Karen was studying biological data from Stonesong's brief contact with the Cascade. The Valar had survived, but the experience had left marks on her that Karen found fascinating and disturbing. The Cascade does not just steal technology, Karen said. It tries to absorb consciousness itself. It wanted to understand how Stonesong thought, how she perceived reality. When it tried the same thing with our data, with human thinking, it encountered something it had never seen before. Creativity, chaos, illogical leaps of intuition, things that work for us but should not work by the Cascade's standards. Jake had been monitoring communications from the Valar ship. Singing Echo and her people were having intense discussions about what to do next. Finally, a message came through requesting a formal meeting between the two ships' commanders. Helen agreed immediately. An hour later, she was in the Pathfinder's conference room with her senior staff. The Valar had sent over a holographic projection system so they could meet face-to-face, or as close as that was possible between two species who had just met. Singing Echo's image appeared in the center of the room. She was smaller than Helen had imagined, with skin that shifted through colors like oil on water. Her forearms moved expressively as she spoke. Commander Helen Pierce, Singing Echo began. What your species has done today will have consequences that reach across the galaxy. The Cascade has been dormant before, but never like this. Our sensors indicate that the virus you introduced has corrupted fundamental systems in its core. It may sleep for 1,000 years. It may sleep forever. That's good news, isn't it? Paul asked. Yes and no, Singing Echo replied. The Cascade was a threat that many civilizations feared. Now it is neutralized, but the method of its defeat will raise questions. Who are these humans? How did they accomplish what species with millions of years of advancement could not? Some will be curious, some will be grateful, but some will be afraid. Helen leaned forward. Afraid of us? We are barely spacefaring. We have 12 people on this ship. Our whole species is limited to one solar system and a few colonies. What could we possibly do that would frighten advanced civilizations? You defeated the Cascade using methods no one has seen before, Singing Echo explained patiently. Your thinking is alien to the rest of the galaxy. What you call creativity and chaos, we call unpredictability. Unpredictable species are dangerous because they cannot be anticipated. They do not follow known patterns. Lisa, who had joined the meeting via communication link from her station, spoke up. So what happens now? Do we just go home and pretend this never happened? That is not possible, Singing Echo said. The Cascade's final transmission was detected by multiple civilizations. They know that something significant happened here. They will investigate, and when they do, they will find evidence of human involvement. You cannot hide. The room fell silent. Helen felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her again. They had come out here to make first contact, to join the galactic community. Instead, they had announced humanity in the most dramatic way possible. The Valar Collective has discussed your situation, Singing Echo continued. We have a proposal. You could join our coalition as a protected junior member. We would guide your development. help you navigate galactic politics and protect you from those who might see you as a threat. Protected junior member, Helen repeated. What does that mean exactly? It means you would be under our authority, Singing Echo said honestly. Your expansion into space would be monitored. Your technology would be evaluated and, where necessary, restricted. You would have a voice in the collective but not an equal one. Not until you have proven yourselves over many generations. Paul looked angry. So we would give up our freedom to be safe? You would trade immediate autonomy for long-term survival, Singing Echo corrected. Many young species make this choice. It is not shameful. Helen looked at her crew. She could see different opinions on their faces. Paul wanted to refuse. Marcus looked thoughtful. Karen seemed torn. Jake was unreadable. Can I speak with my people privately? Helen asked. Of course, Singing Echo said. Her hologram faded. The moment they were alone, the argument started. Paul was adamant that they should reject the offer. He believed humanity should remain independent no matter the cost. Marcus pointed out that they had no idea what threats existed in the galaxy. Protection might be necessary. Karen worried about what restrictions on technology would mean for human development. Jake was the one who finally cut through the noise. We are not just representing ourselves, he said quietly. We are making a decision for all of humanity. Every person on Earth, every person who will ever be born. Can we really make that choice for them? His words brought silence. He was right. They were 12 people on one ship. They had no authority to decide humanity's fate. We need to contact Earth, Helen said finally. We need to tell them everything and let them decide. But Karen shook her head. Commander, we are 4 months away from home even with the quantum drives. A message at light speed would take 40 years to reach Earth and another 40 years for a response. We do not have that kind of time. Helen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. So far away it might as well be in another universe. She thought about everyone back home living their lives, not knowing that their future was being decided here in the depths of space. An idea came to her. It was risky. It might offend the Valar, but it was the only path she could see. Call Singing Echo back, Helen said. I want to make a counter-offer. When the hologram reappeared, Helen was ready. We appreciate your offer, Helen began, and we understand the protection you are offering. But humanity did not come all this way, just to give up our independence. I want to propose something different. A partnership, not a membership. Singing Echo's colors shifted in a way that might have indicated surprise. Explain, she said. Humanity will agree to work with the Valar Collective, Helen said. We will share what we learn. We will accept guidance on navigating galactic politics. But we will not give up our autonomy. We will make our own decisions about our development, our expansion, our future. In exchange, we offer something unique. Our perspective. Our chaotic, unpredictable, creative human thinking. Today proved that sometimes a different approach can solve problems that conventional wisdom cannot. This is unprecedented, Singing Echo said. Junior species are not offered partnerships. They are too unstable, too prone to mistakes. Then we will be the first, Helen replied. And yes, we will make mistakes. But we will also surprise you. We already have. For a long moment, Singing Echo was silent. Her image flickered as if she was communicating with others on her ship. The collective must discuss this, she said finally. But Commander Helen Pierce, I will advocate for your proposal. You have earned that much. What you did inside the Cascade was brave and clever. Perhaps humanity does deserve a chance to prove itself. Thank you, Helen said. Over the next day, the Valar debated among themselves. Helen and her crew waited, trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Finally, Singing Echo returned with an answer. The Valar Collective accepts your proposal, she said, with conditions. Humanity will remain independent, but you will accept observers from our people. They will live on Earth, learn your ways, and report back to us. If we see that humanity is developing in dangerous directions, we reserve the right to intervene. But unless that happens, you will be free to choose your own path. And in exchange, Helen asked. In exchange, you will help us when we need your unique perspective. You will attend the Galactic Assembly as independent representatives. And you will prove that young species can be trusted with freedom. Helen looked at her crew. One by one, they nodded. We accept, Helen said. Singing Echo's colors rippled in what might have been pleasure. Then I am honored to welcome humanity to the galactic community. I will provide coordinates for a neutral meeting station. Your diplomats can meet ours there. We have much to discuss. The Pathfinder began its long journey home 3 days later. Stonesong had recovered enough to return to her own ship, though she would carry the marks of her contact with the Cascade for the rest of her life. Bright,